Today, I'm going to tell you two stories about two very different haunted places. Even though these stories take place decades apart and involve very different people, the message is the same. Encountering ghosts can be deadly. But before we delve into these topics, if you love the strange, the dark, and the mysterious told in story form, you're in the right place. Before we venture into the dark corners of these tales, a small gesture for the living, a big step for the community of mystery lovers. Crush that like button as if a vengeful spirit were forcing you. Subscribe to join our secret circle and never miss another apparition or story. And so the chills may travel, share these tales with those who dare to defy the beyond. Now, get ready, for the time has come to dive into the paranormal. Today's stories await you.
The Midnight Watchers of Bastion Bridge. At approximately 2:30 a.m. on August 27, 2010, the impenetrable darkness of a remote North Carolina wilderness was pierced only by the dancing beams of flashlights. Christopher Kaiser, a 29-year-old man, and his girlfriend Emily, their fingers intertwined, stepped onto the skeletal frame of a railroad bridge, suspended precariously high above the unforgiving ground. A mere 15 minutes separated them from the spectral event they had journeyed so far to witness. A nervous thrill, a shared shiver of anticipation coursed between them. They checked their watches, then began a slow, deliberate trek across the towering structure, each step punctuated by a pause, an anxious straining of ears for the telltale rumble of an approaching train. Yet the only sounds that greeted them were the hushed whispers, sporadic giggles, and excited shouts of 10 other souls, fellow pilgrims in this eerie vigil, clustered along the bridge's formidable length.
This wasn't a place one typically sought out. The Bastion Bridge, as it was known, was a relic of an earlier age, constructed from brick and stone in the 1850s. Its grand arches spanned a ravine 100 feet deep, its 300-foot length carved through by twin iron tracks that vanished into the dense forest on either end. It was, by all accounts, an unremarkable piece of infrastructure, a monotonous stretch of railway in the middle of nowhere. More than that, it was private property, trespassing a minor offense in the face of the arduous rocky hike required to reach it. And, once there, little rewarded the effort. Except for one night a year. Tonight. Because tonight, the Bastion Bridge was not merely an old railway crossing, it was a stage for the supernatural. Tonight, it was said to be haunted. 119 years prior, on August 27, 1891, a passenger train, its metallic scream echoing across the silent landscape, had tragically lost its fight with gravity. It careened from the tracks of this very bridge, plummeting into the chasm below, dragging with it the lives of 23 souls. Christopher and Emily knew the bridge hadn't carried regular passenger traffic in decades, but the chilling legend persisted. Venture to Bastion Bridge on the anniversary of that fateful crash at the precise moment of its descent, and a ghost train would manifest. It would thunder along the tracks, its phantom horn blaring, its spectral brakes screeching a horrifying symphony of failure as it struggled against its inevitable plunge. And then, the screams. The echoes of dying passengers reliving their final terrifying moments. This ghostly procession was the grand spectacle that had drawn Christopher, Emily, and the others into the pre-dawn darkness. Tonight, they were not just lovers or friends, they were ghost hunters.
A voice shattered the tense silence. 1 minute! The words, a stark countdown, silenced the nervous chatter, the nervous laughter, the excited shouts. Every soul on the bridge became still, holding their breath in the suffocating quiet. Christopher and Emily, their hands now clamped together in a desperate grasp, exchanged a look. Their bond was deep, a connection of soulmates forged in shared adventures, and tonight was the epitome of the adrenaline-fueled escapades they both craved. As the final seconds bled away, they turned, eyes fixed on the point where the tracks emerged from the shadowed woods, the direction from which the phantom locomotive was destined to appear. Then a tremor, a subtle vibration that grew, an insistent pulse beneath their feet. A few excited shouts erupted from the other watchers. It was happening! From the depths of the forest, a low rumble materialized, escalating rapidly into a thunderous roar. For a fleeting moment, Christopher and Emily were gripped by disbelief. They had come to see it, to experience it, but a part of them had never truly believed in the spectral reality.
But now, a blinding light tore through the darkness of the woods, engulfing the bridge in an unnatural, piercing glow. The ghost train was upon them. A deafening blast of its horn ripped through the night, followed by the spine-chilling screech of brakes, precisely as the legend foretold. This was no longer an amusingly spooky thrill. It was raw, unadulterated terror. Screams erupted from the other ghost hunters, a panicked chorus as they scattered, their footsteps pounding a frantic retreat from the impending horror. Christopher and Emily joined the desperate flight. But then Christopher stopped. He turned to Emily, his gaze locking with hers, a profound message passed between them. "I love you." And with a surge of desperate strength, Christopher pushed Emily off the bridge. The immediate aftermath was a maelstrom of flashing lights and urgent voices. Police and paramedics swarmed the woods surrounding Bastion Bridge, their searchlights cutting through the darkness of the ravine below. A helicopter's blades beat a relentless rhythm overhead, its powerful beam a desperate eye scanning the treacherous terrain. It wasn't long before a policeman, navigating the steep, unforgiving slope of the ravine, froze. He had found Emily. Miraculously, she was alive, albeit badly injured and barely conscious. The officer looked up, estimating her fall at roughly 30 feet. Her survival was nothing short of a miracle.
As paramedics worked swiftly to secure Emily onto a stretcher, another officer's cry echoed from the ravine's depths, a frantic call for backup. He had found Christopher. In the ensuing hours, the shattered fragments of that night would be painstakingly reassembled by first responders, revealing the full, harrowing truth of what had transpired on Bastion Bridge in the nascent hours of August 27, 2010. At approximately 2:45 a.m., the ghost hunting group, caught in the grip of their shared delusion, had cheered. A brilliant light had emerged from the woods, confirming, they believed, the arrival of the phantom train. But within seconds, their cheers transmuted into a symphony of screams. Christopher, watching the panicked scramble, understood in a flash of chilling clarity. Passenger trains no longer graced these tracks, but freight trains did. And by a cruel, bizarre twist of fate, a real, tangible freight train had barreled onto the bridge at the exact moment the ghost train was prophesied to appear. The conductor, a silhouette of desperation, blasted the horn, desperately attempting to halt the behemoth, but Christopher knew it was futile. The train was moving too fast. There would be no stopping it in time. He and Emily had started to run, following the others in a desperate dash down the bridge. But Christopher saw Emily faltering, lagging behind. He knew he might make it, might outrun the crushing steel. But Emily, the woman he loved more than life itself, wouldn't. It was then that Christopher made an impossible, heartbreaking decision. A swift glance down, a calculation of their grim reality. Then he stopped, waiting for Emily to reach him. He met her gaze, spoke those final precious words, "I love you," and then he pushed her.
Christopher had seen that their position on the bridge was only about 30 feet above the ravine, not the 100 feet of its deepest point. He gambled that a 30-foot fall offered a better chance of survival than the certain annihilation of a speeding freight train. What he must have also understood in that agonizing moment was that by sacrificing his precious time to save her, he was sealing his own fate. He was right. Almost immediately after he propelled Emily to what he hoped was safety, the freight train struck him, flinging his body from the bridge and into the abyss. When the police officer found Christopher a short while later, he was gone. Emily, airlifted to a nearby hospital, eventually recovered from her injuries. Christopher Kaiser, in the annals of this tragic tale, is remembered as a hero.
The second story, The Shadow of the Chain. In the hushed depths of a small eastern Kentucky town, circa the early 1940s, a man named Arthur Lewis moved with a furtive silence that belied his respected standing. Arthur, known by most as an upright, law-abiding citizen, now clutched a hammer and chisel, each step a whisper against the dark road. He sought anonymity, for his clandestine errand was one he wished no soul to witness. The moon and stars, typically comforting, cast an eerie glow, playing tricks with shadows that danced among the trees. Arthur, no man of superstition, felt an inexplicable shiver, a prickle of unease as the darkness seemed to stir with unseen movement. Yet the same ethereal light served his purpose, guiding his path while veiling his presence. He took a fortifying breath, gathered his courage, and melted into the deeper shadows of the road. After a few minutes, Arthur veered onto a secluded dirt track, winding its way to the summit of a small tree-ringed hill. Flickering lights in the distant, dilapidated wooden houses along the road made him crouch lower, hastening his pace, a phantom in the night. At the hill's crest, his progress was halted by a formidable wrought-iron gate, secured with a thick metal chain and a heavy lock. Arthur's eyes swept the surrounding darkness, another steadying breath drawn. He knew the town would brand him mad for his intent, for this land belonged to Carl Puit, a name synonymous with danger. But tonight, Arthur was driven by a singular mission, a defiance that superseded fear. The gate, stubbornly secured, yielded not to his pull. With a calculated move, he tossed his tools over the low fence, then, with surprising agility for a man of his standing, scaled the thin iron bars and dropped silently to the other side. Retrieving his hammer and chisel, he pushed through overgrown grass, nearing his objective. Arthur had not come to labor, but to desecrate, to make a statement. He aimed to shatter the illusion of Carl Puit's power, to free the town from the chilling grip of fear that Carl still commanded. Then he saw it, the engraved stone marker he sought, declaring in stark capital letters that this plot belonged to Carl Puit. Gripping his chisel, Arthur advanced, his tools raised for the strike. But just as he poised to strike, he froze. Before him, cast upon the ground, was the distinct shadow of a large chain. Was it the moonlight playing tricks, or something far more sinister? He whirled around, but the gate and its chain were too far to cast such a shadow. When he looked back, the phantom chain was gone. A nervous laugh escaped him, a shake of the head to dislodge the unsettling vision. The always warped perceptions, he reasoned. He pressed the chisel's cold blade against the stone and brought the hammer down with a resounding clang. A shard of stone flew, striking the ground. The strange shadow was instantly forgotten, replaced by the fervor of his task. He chipped away, faster now,
acutely aware of the noise, the possibility of drawing unwanted attention. He would not be caught. But then, above the rhythmic clang of his tools, he heard it. Footsteps. The very sound he had desperately hoped to avoid. Arthur froze, dropping into a low crouch, attempting to merge with the surrounding shadows. He strained his eyes, peering into the oppressive darkness, but saw no one. The footsteps faded, and Arthur, rationalizing it as the wind rustling through the trees, cautiously returned to his destructive work. Suddenly, the footsteps returned, louder this time, closer. Whoever it was, they were advancing directly towards him. He couldn't distinguish if it was a neighbor, a local officer, or something else entirely, but he wouldn't linger to find out. He spun to flee, but a figure stood directly in his path, blocking his escape. Terror seized him. Without thought, he dropped his tools and bolted into the night. Minutes later, in a house nestled halfway down the road, a man sat in his front room when a blood-curdling scream pierced the night, echoing from Carl Puit's hilltop property. He froze, the sound a cocktail of fear and confusion. People simply didn't venture up that hill anymore. In the chilling silence that followed, he roused himself, shouting for his wife to stay inside before snatching his flashlight and rushing out. On the dirt road, he saw another flashlight beam ahead and recognized his neighbor. They exchanged hurried words about the scream, then together they hastened toward the hilltop. Arriving at the wrought iron gate, their flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating something lying just beyond. They stared in stunned silence, transfixed by the gruesome sight. Finally, one of them broke the spell, volunteering to fetch help, then turned and ran back down the hill, heading for town.
Later that night, the man who had gone for help returned to the gate, now accompanied by a police officer. The neighbor, still rooted to the spot, stood vigil. The three men raised their flashlights, shining them on the ground just beyond the gate. There, they stared at the lifeless body of Arthur Lewis. The heavy metal chain that had secured the gate was now wrapped tightly around Arthur's neck, his face a grotesque bluish gray. The three men looked at each other, a shared understanding passing between them. In other circumstances, such a discovery would ignite shock and alarm, but here only a somber resignation settled over them. They were neither surprised nor afraid, for they knew with chilling certainty what had transpired. Everyone in town knew the depths of Carl Puit's violence. It was why no one dared set foot on his land, and certainly why no one would vandalize anything that belonged to him. This pervasive fear stemmed from a horrific chain of events that began in 1938, a few years before Arthur's fateful trip up the hill. In the late afternoon of 1938, Carl Puit, a carpenter by trade, returned home after a hard day's work. A seemingly affable man, he knew most everyone in town, getting along well with friends and neighbors. He typically found his wife preparing dinner upon his return. But this day, no inviting aromas greeted him, and his wife was not in the kitchen. A strange noise drew him to their bedroom. There, he found his wife in bed with another man.
Carl's scream ripped through the air. The other man scrambled out the window, vanishing into the night. His wife remained, covered by a blanket, pleading for calm, attempting to apologize. But Carl, consumed by a blinding rage, seized a metal chain from his tools, lunged onto the bed, wrapped it around her throat, and strangled her to death. After the murder, Carl Puit vanished, never to be seen or heard from again by the townspeople. Though no arrest or trial ever occurred, the town breathed a collective sigh of relief at his absence, striving to bury the horrific memory. Yet within months, a series of violent deaths began to plague the town, deaths that most believed were no accidents. The first to draw attention was a young man, last seen happily cycling towards the dirt road leading to the hill. Later that day, his lifeless body was found in town, strangled with his own bicycle chain. Days after his burial, his mother was found dead in her yard, strangled with a clothesline while hanging laundry. These two deaths sent a wave of unease through the town. Though unseen, many suspected Carl Puit's return, the method of death mirroring his wife's demise. Soon after, a farmer was found strangled by the reins of his own horse-drawn wagon, prompting a police investigation. But before he could conclude his inquiry, the investigating officer, too, was found dead in an open field, a large chain wrapped around his neck, almost severing his head. The death of the police officer, coupled with the preceding strangulations, plunged the town into a full-blown panic. Whispers turned to stories, tales of Carl Puit wandering his hilltop property in the shadows, awaiting his next victim. And now, it seemed, Arthur Lewis, the man who dared to challenge Carl's fear, had become that victim.
Atop the hill, the officer and the two men who discovered Arthur's body stood by the gate. The officer instructed them to step back and wait. He unlatched the gate, walked through, and stepped directly over Arthur's body. He moved through the grass, locating Arthur's hammer and chisel. Beside them lay the engraved marker Arthur had sought to deface. But when the officer shone his light upon it, the marker was pristine, utterly undamaged. Not a single chip marred its surface. The officer crouched, sweeping his light across the stone. Clearly inscribed were the words Carl Puit, followed by dates, his birth and death. This stone, the very one Arthur had intended to vandalize, was Carl's gravestone. For Carl Puit had died in 1938, on the very day he discovered his wife's infidelity. It was revealed that Carl Puit, after murdering his wife, had taken his own life, a pistol shot to the head. Soon after the murder-suicide, Carl's wife was laid to rest in the nearby church cemetery, but her family, demanding separation, insisted Carl be buried elsewhere. And so Carl found his isolated resting place in an old cemetery atop that desolate hill. The town assumed he was gone for good, his terror finally laid to rest. But that assumption was shattered not long after Carl's burial, when reports began to surface of strange shadows around his gravesite. These shadows always took the same form, a large chain, like the one Carl had used to murder his wife. The story spread, a morbid curiosity about Carl's grave infecting the town. It was around this time that the other strangulation deaths began, and people started to claim Carl's ghost was responsible. But strangulation wasn't the only common thread. It was discovered that not long before their deaths, all the victims had attempted to vandalize Carl Puit's grave. Some acted on a dare, others out of anger. Even the police officer who launched the investigation, intrigued by the ghost stories, visited the gravesite and took photographs. He died shortly thereafter. Arthur, too, had attempted to vandalize the grave, not out of anger or vendetta, but to prove to the town that ghosts were a myth, and Carl Puit, being dead, could no longer harm anyone. Yet the moment Arthur began to deface the headstone, someone or something strangled him to death. Many believed it was Carl Puit's ghost. Despite all attempts at desecration, Carl's headstone was always found, according to local legend, in perfect condition.
We have reached the end of our two stories. And so, if these two tales tell us anything, it's that if you think you can go searching for ghosts without consequences, you can't. A quick note about our stories. They are all based on true events, but we sometimes use pseudonyms to protect the people involved, and some details are fictionalized for dramatic purposes. Thank you for listening to the Vanished Stories podcast. If you enjoyed today's stories and are hungry for more bone-chilling content, you're in exactly the right place. All the stories you've heard today, and hundreds more just like them, are readily available right here on our Vanished Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale. And please share our stories with anyone who loves a good mystery. So, that wraps things up for now. I truly appreciate your support. Until next time, see you.